Now let's begin. The morning air cut cold through my jacket as I pulled the unmarked van up to the curb. 3 months. 91 days since I'd held my son. I killed the engine and sat there, staring at the 2-story brick colonial that had become Tommy's prison. Nate Jordan. That's what my driver's license said. That's what the work order clipped to my dashboard said. But the man who'd walked out of that courthouse in June with empty arms, that man barely existed anymore. I'd hollowed myself out, carved away everything except the singular purpose of getting my boy back. The Precision HVAC Services magnetic sign on the van's door was a $100 purchase from a print shop in Newark. The uniform, the tool belt, the tablet with the fake work order, all of it meticulously assembled over weeks of planning. My hands didn't shake as I gathered my equipment. They hadn't shaken in years, not since Fallujah, not since I learned that fear was just another obstacle to work through. I'd been a Marine before I was a father, before I was a husband, before I became a contractor who built decks and renovated kitchens, and somehow thought that was enough of a life to offer Becky Manning. She'd wanted more. Her family had always made that clear. The Mannings owned half the commercial real estate in Bergen County. Herbert Manning sat on the boards of 3 hospitals and 2 banks. When Becky filed for divorce, her father's lawyers had buried me in motions and continuances until my savings evaporated and my legal aid attorney looked at me with pity in her eyes. Temporary custody, Judge Richardson had ruled, until Mr. Jordan can demonstrate stable employment and housing. Temporary. The word was a knife that twisted daily. I rang the doorbell. Through the frosted glass, a shape approached, tall, broad-shouldered. The door swung open to reveal Herbert Manning himself, 63 years old and dressed like he was heading to the country club despite it being 10 in the morning on a Thursday. "You're late," he said, not moving from the doorway. I checked my watch. "Appointment was for 10, sir. It's 9:58. His jaw tightened. Herbert Manning wasn't used to being corrected. "The unit's on the 2nd floor. Try not to track dirt through the house." The interior was exactly what I'd expected. Marble floors, crystal chandelier, furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Family photos lined the walls of the entrance hall. Becky at her college graduation. Becky and her brother Danny at some charity gala. Not a single picture of Tommy. "2nd floor, east wing," Herbert said, already walking away. "I'll be in my study. Knock when you're finished." I climbed the stairs slowly, eyes cataloging everything. Security system panel near the kitchen, ADT, probably connected to their phones. Cameras in the corners of the main rooms, but I'd expected that. The Mannings were careful people, careful enough to hide what they were doing. The master bedroom door stood open, California King, ensuite bathroom with a jacuzzi tub. The guest room across from it was pristine, clearly never used. Danny's old room, judging by the baseball trophies on the shelves, had been converted into a home gym. Then I found the laundry room. The door was closed. I turned the handle slowly. The smell hit me first, detergent and bleach, and underneath it, the sour tang of urine. The room was maybe 8 feet by 10. A washer and dryer dominated one wall. Against the opposite wall, on the floor, was a thin mattress. No frame. No sheets. A gray blanket that looked like it had come from a donation bin was wadded up in one corner. My son's stuffed elephant, the one I'd given him for his 4th birthday, sat on top of the dryer, just out of reach from the floor. And in the corner, next to the mattress, sat a red plastic bucket. Something dark and cold spread through my chest. I'd learned to control rage in the Marines. They taught you how to bottle it, how to transform it into fuel for your mission. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. The mattress, the bucket, the elephant on the dryer, the narrow window that barely let in light. Footsteps in the hallway. I slipped the phone into my pocket and grabbed my inspection camera, making a show of checking the air vent near the ceiling. Herbert appeared in the doorway. "Problem. Just being thorough," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Mind if I ask what this room is used for?" "Storage. The boy stays here temporarily." He said it like Tommy was a piece of luggage they'd agreed to hold on to. "Keeps him out of the way." "The bucket," I said, pointing. "What's that for?" Herbert actually laughed. A sharp, dismissive sound. "The kid pisses at night. We don't let him use our bathroom. Ruins the carpet, makes noise. This way he learns some discipline." I nodded slowly, still looking at the bucket, still taking mental photographs of Herbert's smug expression. "Makes sense. Does it?" He seemed pleased that I'd agreed. "My daughter, his mother, she coddled him. Let him run wild. We're teaching him structure. How's that working out? He's learning. Herbert checked his watch. How much longer? I have a conference call at 11. Few more hours. Gotta check all the ductwork, make sure the refrigerant levels are right. Standard maintenance. He waved a hand dismissively and walked away. I waited until his footsteps faded before I pulled out my phone again. More pictures, measurements, documentation. The AC unit was in the attic. It took me 20 minutes to access it and another hour to actually inspect it. The system was running fine, barely needed a filter change. But I took my time, giving myself opportunity to move through the house. Herbert's study was on the first floor, doors slightly ajar. I could hear him on his conference call, voice booming with authority as he discussed quarterly projections with what sounded like hospital administrators. Through the gap, I saw filing cabinets, a mahogany desk cluttered with paperwork. The kitchen was where I found Irma Manning. She was smaller than her husband, bird-boned and sharp-featured, arranging flowers in a crystal vase. She didn't look up when I entered. Need to check the thermostat, I said. She pointed to the wall without speaking. I made a show of examining it, testing the buttons, all while studying her. She moved with nervous energy, adjusting the flowers over and over, never satisfied with the arrangement. How long have you had custody of the boy? I asked casually. Her hand stilled. That's none of your business. Just making conversation. I've got a kid myself. Then you should know children need discipline. She turned to face me, her expression hard. Structure. Rules. Not whatever liberal nonsense is popular these days. What kind of rules? Bedtime at 7. No television. No toys except Sunday afternoons if he's been good. Meals in his room. She rattled off the list like she was proud of it. He tests boundaries. We don't tolerate that. 7 o'clock bedtime seems early for a 6-year-old. 6.5, she corrected. And it's what he needs. His mother never set boundaries. We're fixing her mistakes. I wanted to ask about the bucket. About the mattress on the floor. About why my son's bedroom was a goddamn laundry room. But I was a repairman. Repairmen didn't ask those questions. Instead, I nodded and moved to check the vents in the living room. Irma went back to her flowers, already dismissing me from her thoughts. It was close to 2 in the afternoon when I finished. I'd photographed every room, documented every detail, and my rage had crystallized into something cold and purposeful. Herbert emerged from his study to inspect my work, nodding with the kind of condescension that came naturally to men like him. Bill us, he said, already turning away. One more thing. I pulled out a small notepad, wrote quickly. Left this with some maintenance tips for the system. Figured I'd leave it somewhere visible. Fine, fine. He was already walking back to his study. I went to the laundry room one last time. The mattress was still there, the bucket still in the corner. I placed the folded note on top of the gray blanket, making sure it would be the first thing Tommy saw when they locked him in here tonight. The note was simple, written in the block letters I'd used for his bedtime stories. Daddy will fix everything. I drove away from that house with my hands steady on the wheel and a plan forming in my mind. The Mannings thought they'd won. They thought their money and their lawyers and their connections had buried me completely. They'd forgotten that I was a Marine. We don't leave our people behind. By Monday, everything would change. Friday morning, I sat in Grant Zimmerman's cramped office above a Korean barbecue restaurant in Fort Lee. Grant had been my squad leader in Fallujah before he'd gone to law school on the GI Bill. Now he handled family law cases for people who couldn't afford the big firms. Show me, he said. I laid my phone on his desk and started the slideshow. 43 photographs total. The mattress, the bucket, the cramped space, the contrast with the rest of the house. Grant's expression darkened with each image. Jesus, Nate. That's where they're keeping him. My voice came out flat. 3 months. 91 nights sleeping on that floor. Grant leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his thinning hair. This is bad. This is really bad. But what? You obtained these through deception. Posed as a repairman to gain access to private property. I was invited in. They called for AC repair. Through a fake company you created. A judge might see that as. I don't care what a judge might see it as. I leaned forward. Grant, they're abusing him. That bucket. He's 6 years old, and they won't let him use a bathroom at night. I know. I get it. Grant picked up the phone, studied the images again. But if we try to use this evidence and it gets thrown out, we've tipped our hand. The Mannings will clean up their act, and we'll have nothing. So what do we do? He was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Grant had always been good at strategy. It's why he'd kept our squad alive when everything went sideways in Ramadi. We need a legal way to get eyes on that house. Child services, a court-ordered inspection, something that gives us clean evidence. That takes time. Everything in family court takes time. You know that. I didn't know that. I'd learned it the hard way over the past year. The Mannings lawyers had dragged out every hearing, filed motions to delay, used every trick in the book. And Judge Richardson, who played golf with Herbert Manning at the country club, had allowed every single delay. What if we don't go through Richardson? I asked. Grant looked up sharply. What are you thinking? You said child services. What if we make a report? Anonymous tip about child neglect at the Manning residence? They'd investigate, sure. But Herbert Manning has connections. He'd get advance warning, clean everything up before any caseworker arrived. Not if the tip comes from the right source. Not if it's credible enough that they have to act immediately. Grant studied me. What did you do, Nate? Nothing yet. I picked up my phone, flipped to a different folder of photos. But yesterday, while I was checking their attic, I noticed something interesting about their electrical system. The images showed the breaker box in the Manning house. Specifically, they showed several circuits labeled in Herbert's precise handwriting. Study, north wall, wine cellar, main, study, safe room. Safe room. Grant leaned closer. Behind the bookshelf in his study. I saw the scene when I was checking the thermostat nearby. Climate-controlled space, separate electrical system, reinforced door. People have safe rooms. That's not unusual for someone wealthy. True. But why does it need its own climate control? Why does it pull enough power to need 3 separate circuits? I pulled up another photo. And why does the wine cellar have a ventilation system that's way oversized for the space? Grant sat back. You think he's hiding something? I know he is. The Mannings didn't get temporary custody because they're good people. They got it because they have money and connections and a lawyer who knows how to play the system. But rich people always have secrets. We just need to find the right one. That's a dangerous game. I spent 2 tours in Fallujah. I know dangerous. I met his eyes. Tommy's sleeping on a floor next to a piss bucket. I don't care about dangerous anymore. Grant was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled out a legal pad and started writing. Okay, let's say you're right and Herbert's hiding something. What's your play? We dig. Find out what he's protecting. Use it as leverage. Leverage for what? Full custody. Immediate transfer. And a restraining order keeping the Mannings away from Tommy permanently. That's aggressive. They put my son in a laundry room. Grant nodded slowly. Fair point. But we need to be smart about this. If Herbert has something to hide, he'll have protected it. Lawyers, shell companies, offshore accounts, whatever it is, he'll have buried it deep. Then we dig deep. Grant raised an eyebrow. Nate, I'm a lawyer. I can file motions and argue cases, but I can't. I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. Just give me the legal framework. Tell me what we need to make this work. He considered for a long moment, tapping his pen against the pad. Finally, we need documentation. Hard evidence of something that would make a judge question Herbert's character and fitness as a guardian. Financial crimes, fraud, something that shows he's not the upstanding citizen he pretends to be. And if I can get that, then I can file an emergency motion to modify custody. But it would have to be airtight. One mistake and Richardson throws it out, and we're done. I stood up, pocketing my phone. Give me until Monday. Nate. Monday morning. I'll have what we need. Grant shook his head, but didn't argue. He'd seen that look before, back when we were clearing houses in Iraq. Once I locked onto a target, I didn't stop until the mission was complete. I left his office and drove to a diner in Hackensack. Wayne Strong was already there, sitting in a back booth with a cup of coffee and a plate of eggs he wasn't touching. Wayne and I had grown up in the same neighborhood, joined the Marines together, done our tours together. Now he worked construction and drank too much and tried to forget everything we'd seen overseas. You look like shit, he said when I slid into the booth. I need a favor. Of course you do. But he was already pulling out a cigarette, rolling it between his fingers without lighting it. The diner didn't allow smoking, but the motion was habit. What kind of favor? The kind you're good at. Wayne had been in reconnaissance. He knew how to watch people without being seen, how to track movements, how to find patterns. After we got out, those skills had translated into less legal activities. Nothing major, but enough that he knew his way around surveillance equipment and computer systems. I'm trying to go straight, Nate. I know. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. It's about your kid. Yeah. He sighed, finally setting down the cigarette. What do you need? I showed him the photos of Herbert's study, the electrical system, the layout of the house. I need to know what's in that safe room. And I need to know what's valuable enough in the wine cellar that it requires that kind of ventilation. Wayne studied the images. You want me to break into Herbert Manning's house. I want you to help me understand what he's protecting. There's a difference. Not to the cops, there isn't. The cops don't care about my kid sleeping next to a bucket of his own piss. Wayne flinched. Jesus. For real. For real. He was quiet for a moment, then pulled out his own phone and started tapping notes. Okay, Manning's got money, which means he's got security. Cameras, alarm system, probably a monitoring service that reports to his phone. We need to bypass all of that without leaving traces. Can you do it? Can I? Yeah. Should I? He looked up at me. This could blow up in your face, Nate. If we get caught. We won't get caught. How are you so sure? Because I'm not asking you to break in. I'm asking you to help me monitor the house from outside. Track their patterns, figure out their schedule, see what's going on. Wayne raised an eyebrow. That's not what you asked for 30 seconds ago. I'm clarifying. He laughed, short and sharp. You're full of shit. But fine. I'll help. When do we start? Tonight. We spent the rest of Friday planning. Wayne had equipment left over from a job he'd done for a private investigation firm. Long-range cameras, listening devices, signal interceptors. Nothing we planned to use was technically illegal as long as we stayed outside the property. Technically. By 8 p.m., we were parked 2 blocks from the Manning house in Wayne's nondescript Honda. He'd set up a laptop connected to a directional microphone pointed at the house, and I had binoculars trained on the windows. There, Wayne said, pointing at his screen. Someone just came out the back door. I swung the binoculars around. Danny Manning, Becky's younger brother, stepped onto the back patio carrying a black duffel bag. He was 32, worked at his father's company doing something vague with business development, and had the soft look of someone who'd never done a hard day's work in his life. He loaded the duffel into the trunk of his Mercedes and drove off. Follow? Wayne asked. No. Stay on the house. 30 minutes later, Becky's car pulled into the driveway. She got out, moved with that quick, nervous energy I remembered from our marriage. She'd always been anxious around her parents, always trying to meet their impossible standards. She went inside. Lights came on upstairs, the master bedroom wing, far from the laundry room where Tommy slept. This is depressing, Wayne muttered, adjusting the microphone. We watching them all night. Until we see something useful. What we saw was a family that barely acknowledged my son existed. At 7 p.m., exactly 7 p.m., Herbert walked through the house, and I saw his shadow pause at the laundry room door. He opened it, said something we couldn't hear, and closed it again, locking it from the outside. Did he just? Wayne started. Yeah. They're locking a 6-year-old in a laundry room. Yeah. Wayne sat back, jaw clenched. We're getting your kid out of there. Monday. Why wait? Because I need leverage. Need to make sure that when I take him back, they can't use their lawyers and their money to take him again. We stayed until midnight. Learned that Herbert went to bed at 11, that Irma took sleeping pills at 10:30, that Becky stayed up late watching television in the guest room. The house had motion sensors on the doors and windows, cameras covering the front and back entrances, and probably more security we couldn't see. Breaking in would be possible, but risky. What we needed was an invitation. Saturday morning, I drove to Newark and met with Maria Schmidt in a coffee shop near the county courthouse. Maria was a social worker I'd met during my custody battle. She'd been the one to interview me for the initial evaluation, and she'd been one of the few people in the system who seemed to actually care about Tommy's welfare rather than just checking boxes. Mr. Jordan, she said, surprised when I sat down across from her. I didn't expect to hear from you. I need advice. She frowned, stirring her coffee. I can't discuss your case. You know that. This isn't about the case. Not officially. I pulled out my phone, but didn't show her the photos yet. Hypothetically, if someone suspected child abuse, what would trigger an immediate investigation? Her expression shifted, professional concern replacing the friendly surprise. What kind of abuse? Neglect. Unsafe living conditions. Emotional abuse. Is this about Tommy? Hypothetically. Maria set down her coffee cup carefully. Mr. Jordan, Nate, if you have concerns about your son's welfare, you need to report them through proper channels. And those channels go where? through a system that gave custody to people who donated to the judge's re-election campaign. That's a serious accusation. It's a fact. Judge Richardson and Herbert Manning play golf together. It's public record that the Manning family contributed $20,000 to Richardson's campaign last year. Maria was quiet for a moment. Even so, the proper procedure. The proper procedure is broken. I need to know what would force an immediate, unannounced inspection. What would make Child Services act before Herbert Manning's lawyers could intervene? She studied me with those sharp social worker eyes, the ones that had seen too many broken families and not enough happy endings. An immediate, credible report of imminent danger to the child. Physical abuse, unsanitary conditions, evidence of serious neglect that poses a health or safety risk. And who determines if it's credible? The responding officer and the assigned caseworker. If the report includes specific details, corroborating evidence, or comes from a reliable source, we're required to investigate within 24 hours. But Manning would get a heads up. Not if the report suggests active abuse. We can get an emergency order to inspect immediately if there's probable cause. I finally showed her one photo. Just the laundry room with the mattress and bucket, no context. Maria's face went pale. Where is this? Hypothetically, if this was where a 6-year-old child was forced to sleep, would that qualify as imminent danger? My God, she enlarged the image, studying the bucket, the dirty mattress. Yes, absolutely yes. This is, who took this photo? A concerned party who had legal access to the residence. Nate, if this is Tommy. I'm not saying it is. I'm asking, hypothetically, what happens next if someone files a report with this kind of evidence? Maria looked at me for a long moment, then wrote something on a napkin and slid it across the table. This is the direct line to the emergency response unit. Reports made to this number get flagged for immediate action. But you need to understand, if you're making a false report, there are serious consequences. I understand. And if the people you're accusing have resources, they'll fight back hard. Let them. She folded the napkin and tucked it into my hand. Good luck, Nate. I hope your hypothetical child is okay. I left the coffee shop with the phone number and a plan starting to solidify. But I still needed more. The photos would get Child Services through the door, but I needed leverage to keep the Mannings from retaliating, from using their money and influence to make this go away. I needed to know what Herbert was hiding. Saturday night, I went back to basics. Before the Marines, before construction work, I'd been a kid who learned computers in public library after school because we couldn't afford one at home. Those skills had come in handy in Iraq when we needed to hack local networks or trace digital footprints. They came in handy now. I started with public records. Herbert Manning's business holdings, property records, tax filings, anything available through legal databases. On the surface, everything looked legitimate. Manning Properties LLC owned commercial real estate throughout Bergen County. Herbert sat on corporate boards, made charitable donations, appeared in society pages at fundraiser galas. But when I dug deeper, things got interesting. Manning Properties had 3 subsidiary LLCs registered in Delaware. Those subsidiaries owned properties that weren't listed in any of Herbert's public disclosures: a warehouse in Kearney, a storage facility in Secaucus, a vacant lot in Patterson that had been under development for 6 years. Why hide those holdings? I ran searches on the addresses. The Kearney warehouse had been cited twice by OSHA for safety violations, something about improper chemical storage. The Secaucus facility had a history of noise complaints from neighboring businesses. The Patterson lot had a Superfund designation from contaminated soil. These weren't the kind of properties a respectable businessman wanted associated with his name. I dug further into the OSHA reports. The warehouse had been storing industrial solvents without proper ventilation. The violations had been corrected, fines paid, but the records showed multiple inspections and a pattern of cutting corners on environmental regulations. And the entity that had paid those fines? A shell company called Triborough Holdings, registered to an address that turned out to be a UPS store in Fort Lee. I kept pulling threads. Triborough Holdings had filed quarterly reports with the state, listing Herbert Manning as registered agent. The company claimed to be in import-export consulting, but had no website, no public presence, no employees listed beyond Herbert himself. By 3 a.m. Sunday morning, I had a picture forming. Herbert Manning presented himself as a legitimate businessman, But he was using shell companies to hide properties and business activities that didn't fit his public image. Whether it was illegal or just ethically questionable, I couldn't say yet. But it was leverage. Sunday afternoon, I drove back to the Manning house. Didn't go inside this time, just parked on the street like any other neighbor and watched. At 2 p.m., a black Escalade pulled up and Danny Manning got out carrying another duffel bag, same as Friday night. He went inside, came out 20 minutes later without the bag. 30 minutes after that, Herbert emerged and drove off in his Lexus. I waited until he was gone, then called Wayne. I need you to follow Danny Manning. Now. Right now? He's driving a silver Mercedes, probably heading back to his place in Hoboken. I need to know what he does for the rest of the day. You buying me dinner for this? I'll buy you a whole damn restaurant if we pull this off. Wayne showed up 10 minutes later. I gave him Danny's plate number and description, and he took off. I stayed on the house, watching. At 4 p.m., Becky's car pulled up. She got out, but instead of going inside, she stood in the driveway for several minutes, just staring at the house. Her body language was tense, reluctant. Finally, she went in through the front door. I used the binoculars to track her movement through the windows. She went upstairs, disappeared for a few minutes, then came back down carrying a small suitcase. She was leaving. I was about to follow when my phone buzzed. Wayne, you need to see this. See what? Danny's at a storage unit in Hoboken. He's moving stuff out of a locker. Medical equipment. Lots of it. What kind of medical equipment? The expensive kind. Diagnostic machines, pharmaceutical fridges, stuff that looks like it belongs in a hospital. Get photos. Already on it. I thought about the warehouse violations, the shell companies, the hidden properties. Medical equipment being moved through storage units. Herbert Manning sitting on hospital boards, having access to procurement systems and supply chains. Wayne, is any of it marked? What? The equipment. Does it have hospital tags, inventory numbers, anything identifying where it came from? A pause while he checked. Yeah, St. Benedict's Hospital. Newark, St. Benedict's. Where Herbert Manning was on the board of directors. Pieces started clicking together. Herbert used his position to divert medical equipment, either excess inventory or items marked for disposal, and resold them through his shell companies. It wasn't huge money, probably, but it was fraud. Theft from a non-profit hospital. It was criminal, and it was exactly the leverage I needed. I spent Sunday evening at Grant's office, laying out everything I'd found. The photos of Tommy's living conditions, the shell companies, the hidden properties, the medical equipment being funneled through Danny Manning's storage unit. Wayne's surveillance photos showing Danny loading equipment into unmarked vans. Grant listened to it all, taking notes, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. This is bigger than I thought, he said finally. Can we use it? The custody stuff, absolutely. These photos are damning. But the fraud angle. He tapped his pen against the desk. We need to be careful. If we accuse Herbert of criminal activity without solid proof, his lawyers will bury us in defamation suits. What if we don't accuse him directly? What if we just make sure the right people start asking questions? Grant looked up. You want to tip off the authorities. Anonymous report to the State Attorney General's office. Financial fraud investigation. Once that's in motion, Herbert's going to be too busy protecting himself to fight a custody battle. That's smart. I was going to say risky as hell. But yeah, also smart. Grant pulled up a fresh document on his computer. Okay, here's how we do this. Tomorrow morning, first thing, you file a report with Child Services using those photos. They'll inspect the house, hopefully document everything before the Mannings can clean up. And the fraud. I'll make some calls. I know an investigator at the AG's office who handles healthcare fraud. If I send him what we have, he'll at least look into it. How long before Herbert knows we're coming? Child Services? They'll show up within hours of your report. The AG investigation? That could take weeks to hit. But once it starts, Herbert's going to know someone dropped a dime on him. By then it won't matter. I'll have Tommy back. Grant nodded slowly. You better be right about this, Nate. Because if it goes sideways, it won't. How can you be sure? I thought about Fallujah. About kicking in doors and clearing rooms and trusting that your training and your brothers had your back. About making life and death decisions in the space of a heartbeat. Because failure isn't an option. Monday morning, 6 a.m. I sat in my truck outside an IHOP, phone in hand, the napkin with Maria Schmidt's emergency number laid flat on the dashboard. This was it. Once I made this call, there was no going back. The Mannings would know I was coming for them. They'd throw everything they had at me: lawyers, money, influence. They'd try to destroy me. But I'd spent 3 months watching my son suffer. 3 months of that mattress on the floor, that bucket in the corner, those locked doors, and 7 p.m. bedtimes. 3 months of feeling powerless while the system ground me down. I wasn't powerless anymore. I dialed the number. Emergency response. This is Kelly. I need to report child neglect and abuse. My voice came out steady, calm. Combat calm. A 6-year-old boy is being kept in unsafe conditions at 47 Mountain View Drive in Alpine. Can you describe the conditions, sir? I did. Every detail. The laundry room, the mattress, the bucket, the locked door. I described the contrast with the rest of the house, the emotional abuse, the isolation. I told them I had photographic evidence. And your relationship to the child? I'm his father. I see. And do you currently have custody? No. The grandparents have temporary custody. That's why I'm calling. They're not fit guardians. There was typing on the other end. Mr. Jordan. Nate Jordan. Mr. Jordan, I'm flagging this for immediate response. We'll have officers at that address within 2 hours. Can you send the photographic evidence you mentioned? I sent the photos. All 43 of them. Received. Mr. Jordan, I need you to understand that you'll need to make yourself available for an interview as well. I'm available whenever you need me. Someone will contact you shortly. I hung up and sat there for a moment, letting it sink in. I'd just pulled the pin on a grenade and thrown it into the Manning family's perfect life. Now I just had to make sure I was far enough away when it exploded. At 7:30, I called Grant. It's done. Child Services is moving. Good. I just sent everything to my contact at the AG. He's interested, really interested. Apparently St. Benedict's has been dealing with inventory discrepancies for the past 2 years. They've been chalking it up to administrative errors. But if Herbert's been systematically stealing equipment, they'll investigate. Oh, they'll investigate. My guy said they might even execute a search warrant on the Kearney warehouse. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief. Not yet, but the first hint that maybe this would actually work. What's next? I asked. We wait for Child Services to do their job. Once they document the conditions, we file an emergency motion to modify custody. I'll have it ready to go the minute we get their report. How long? Could be as soon as this afternoon if they move fast. More likely tomorrow morning. And Herbert, once he knows what's happening, he'll lawyer up and try to get ahead of it. But between the custody issue and the fraud investigation, he's going to have his hands full. We just need to keep the pressure on. I spent the next 3 hours at a different coffee shop, laptop open, monitoring local news feeds and police scanners. At 10:15, I picked up chatter about a welfare check in Alpine. Officers and Child Services en route. They were there. At 11, my phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Jordan? This is Detective Sarah Hollis with the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office. I need to speak with you about a report you filed this morning. My stomach tightened. I'm available. Can you come to our offices in Hackensack? Say 1 p.m. I'll be there. I hung up and immediately called Grant. The prosecutor's office wants to talk to me. That's standard. They'll want to verify your report. Ask about how you obtained the photos. Just tell the truth. You were hired as a repairman. You saw the conditions, you documented them. They're going to ask about the fake company. So you tell them you do freelance repair work and created a business name for billing purposes. Not illegal. Just stick to the facts about what you saw and why you were concerned. What if they ask about the fraud investigation? You don't know anything about that. As far as you're concerned, you're just a father worried about his son's welfare. The interview at the prosecutor's office lasted 2 hours. Detective Hollis was thorough, professional, and clearly skeptical of my story. But the photos spoke for themselves. She had me walk through every detail, how I'd gotten the repair call, what I'd seen, why I'd taken the pictures. And you didn't think to report this immediately? She asked. I wanted to document everything first. Make sure I had proof. Or you wanted to make sure you had leverage in a custody dispute. I met her eyes. My son was sleeping on a floor next to a bucket of his own piss. I don't care what you think my motivations were. I care that he's safe. She studied me for a long moment, then closed her notebook. Child Services is at the residence now. They're documenting everything. We'll need you to make yourself available for their interview as well. Whatever you need. Mr. Jordan? She stopped me as I stood to leave. For what it's worth, I have kids too. If those photos are accurate, you did the right thing. It was the first time anyone in the system had said that to me. I was back in my truck when Grant called. Child Services just seized Tommy from the house. He's in protective custody. Everything stopped. The street noise, the traffic, my own breathing. He's out. He's out. They're doing a medical evaluation now, and there'll be a hearing tomorrow morning to determine placement. Judge Richardson can't touch this. It goes to family court under emergency jurisdiction. Can I see him? Not yet. Not until after the evaluation and the hearing. But Nate, this is good. This is really good. Child Services found everything you documented plus more. Apparently Tommy had bruises on his arms. Defensive wounds, they're calling them. The dark thing in my chest flared hot. They hit him. Looks that way. The medical examiner is documenting everything. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, breathing through the rage. Herbert Manning had put his hands on my son, had hurt him, and I'd left him there for 3 months. Nate, you still there? I'm here. Don't do anything stupid. We're winning. Don't fuck it up now by going after Herbert. I'm not going to do anything. You're a terrible liar. I'm not going to do anything illegal, I clarified. But I am going to make sure Herbert Manning understands exactly what he's lost. I hung up before Grant could argue. At 4 p.m., I drove to the Manning house. Herbert's Lexus was in the driveway, along with Becky's car and 2 vehicles I didn't recognize, probably lawyers. The front door was shut, curtains drawn, the house locked down tight. I parked across the street and waited. 30 minutes later, the door opened and Herbert emerged with 2 men in suits. They stood on the front steps, Herbert's face red, gesturing angrily as the lawyers tried to calm him down. Even from a distance, I could read his body language. He was furious, cornered, desperate. Good. He spotted my truck. For a moment, we locked eyes across the street. I didn't move, didn't react. Just sat there and let him see me. Let him know I was the one who'd brought his world crashing down. Herbert said something to the lawyers and started across the street toward me. They tried to stop him, but he shrugged them off. I rolled down my window as he approached. You son of a bitch, he snarled. You did this. You set me up. I didn't set you up. I just showed people what you really are. Those photos were obtained illegally. My lawyers will. Your lawyers will tell you that I was legally invited into your home to perform repair work. What I saw there was evidence of child abuse. Any court in the country will allow that evidence. His face was purple now. You have no idea who you're fucking with. Former Marine, 2 tours in Iraq. I know exactly what I'm dealing with. A coward who beats children and steals from hospitals. He froze. What did you say? St. Benedict's Hospital. The warehouse in Kearney. Triborough Holdings. Should I keep going? For the first time, I saw fear in Herbert Manning's eyes. You're bluffing. Am I? Want to bet your freedom on that. He took a step back, calculating. What do you want? I want my son. Full custody, no visitation for you or your family, and a stipulation that you'll never contest it. Ever. I can't. Or I make sure the Attorney General knows every single detail about your little medical equipment operation. Your choice. Herbert's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Finally, you can't prove anything. Maybe not, but I can make sure they look. And once they start looking at a hospital board member for fraud, your reputation, your business, your whole life, it all goes under a microscope. How many other corners have you cut, Herbert? How many other laws have you bent? He didn't answer. Didn't need to. We both knew I was right. Tomorrow's hearing, I said. Your lawyers can agree to emergency custody transfer, or they can fight it and deal with what comes next. Your call. I rolled up the window and drove away, leaving Herbert standing in the street. Tuesday morning, 9 a.m., Bergen County Family Court. I sat in the gallery with Grant while the judge, not Richardson, thank God, reviewed the Child Services report. Tommy was in a conference room with a social worker, being kept away from both me and the Mannings until the hearing concluded. Herbert and Irma sat across the aisle with their legal team, 3 lawyers in expensive suits who looked ready for war. Becky wasn't there. The judge, a stern woman named Patricia Callahan, read through the report with an expression that grew darker by the page. Finally, she looked up. Mr. Manning, the conditions described in this report are appalling. I've reviewed the photographic evidence and the medical examination. Your grandson has been living in what can only be described as a storage closet, with inadequate bedding, no bathroom access, and signs of physical abuse. Your Honor, one of Herbert's lawyers stood. We'd like to address these allegations. My client. Your client will have an opportunity to speak in a moment. First, I want to hear from Child Services. The caseworker who'd conducted the inspection took the stand. She was young but professional, and her testimony was damning. She described the laundry room, the bucket, the locked door, the bruises on Tommy's arms, his withdrawn behavior, his fear of adults, his anxiety about speaking. In my professional opinion, she concluded, this child was subjected to systematic neglect and emotional abuse. The physical environment was unsafe and inappropriate for a child of any age. And your recommendation? Immediate removal from the Manning household and placement with the biological father, pending full custody evaluation. Herbert's lawyer stood again. Your Honor, we strenuously object. Mr. Jordan obtained those photographs through deception and Mr. Jordan was lawfully present in the home. Judge Callahan cut him off. Whether he disclosed his true purpose is irrelevant to what he documented. The question before this court is the child's welfare, not Mr. Jordan's investigative techniques. But Your Honor, I've made my decision. Temporary custody is granted to Nathan Jordan, effective immediately. The court will schedule a full custody hearing within 30 days. Until then, the Mannings are prohibited from contact with the minor child except under supervised visitation, if Mr. Jordan agrees to allow such visits. She banged her gavel. We're adjourned. I sat there for a moment, letting it sink in. I'd won. I'd actually won. Grant clapped me on the shoulder. Congratulations. Go get your son. They brought Tommy out 10 minutes later. He was small for 6.5, with Becky's dark hair and my gray eyes. When he saw me, he stopped, uncertain. Hey, buddy, I said, kneeling down to his level. Daddy. His voice was so quiet I barely heard it. Yeah, it's me. Are you really fixing everything? I thought about the note I'd left him. The promise I'd made. Yeah, Tommy. Everything's fixed now. You're coming home. He ran to me then, and I caught him and held him and felt 3 months of pain and rage and fear finally start to ease. Over his shoulder, I saw Herbert Manning standing in the corridor, watching. His expression was hollow, defeated. He knew it was over. The fraud investigation, the custody loss, the public exposure, all of it was crashing down on him. I met his eyes one last time and saw nothing there but the wreckage of his arrogance. Good. 3 weeks later, Wayne called me with news. The AG raided the Kearney warehouse. Found over $2 million worth of stolen medical equipment. They arrested Danny Manning this morning and issued a warrant for Herbert. Where's Herbert? Nobody knows. Word is he tried to flee to the Caymans, but customs flagged him at JFK. He's in federal custody. I stood on the back porch of my house. Our house now, mine and Tommy's, and watched my son play in the yard with a new football I'd bought him. He was laughing. Actually laughing. What's going to happen to them? I asked Wayne. Herbert's looking at 10 to 15 for the fraud charges. Danny might get a plea deal if he cooperates. Irma, probably nothing. She wasn't involved in the business side. And Becky, filed for divorce last week. Moved to Pennsylvania to stay with her aunt. She's trying to get visitation with Tommy, but after everything, she can see him, supervised, at my discretion. But she needs to understand, I'm done letting people hurt him. Fair enough. Wayne paused. You did good, man. You got your kid back. We got him back. Nah, this was all you. I just watched. I hung up and walked into the yard. Tommy saw me coming and ran over, football tucked under his arm. Can we practice throws? He asked. Absolutely. We spent the next hour running plays in the yard, Tommy's throws getting stronger with each attempt. He smiled more now. Slept in a real bed with sheets and blankets and stuffed animals. Used the bathroom like a normal kid. Started talking again without that fearful hesitation. It would take time for him to fully heal. There would be therapy, tough conversations, moments when the trauma surfaced. But we'd face it together. As the sun set, Tommy came and sat next to me on the porch steps. Daddy. Yeah, bud. Are the bad people gone? I thought about Herbert in a federal holding cell, about Danny facing fraud charges, about Irma alone in that big house with all its empty rooms. Yeah, I said. The bad people are gone. Forever. Forever. He leaned against my shoulder, and I put my arm around him. My son. Safe. Home. Where he belonged. The Mannings had thought their money and power made them untouchable. They'd thought they could break a father's spirit, take his child, and face no consequences. They'd learned different. Because you don't mess with a Marine's family. You don't hurt a father's son. And you definitely don't trap a man who's willing to burn everything down to protect the people he loves. I'd promised Tommy I'd fix everything. Mission accomplished. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.